Eric Bischoff has reacted to reports of AEW's newest media rights deal, and what he had to say might surprise you guys. We're going to talk about it. We're going to take a look at exactly what Eric Bischoff said, how he reacted, and kind of what this means in the larger scheme of things, as Bischoff has been one of AEW's sharpest critics over the past couple of years, and what insight from the former head of WCW is actually pretty valuable and could go a long way for AEW as a company, and what, maybe is not that valuable. We'll talk about it. We're going to get into it. Be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Let's get right into it. So, Eric Bischoff over the last couple of years has been, as I said, one of AEW's sharpest critics, and he usually comes to it from the perspective of someone who took on WWE as not just a challenger brand, but as a legitimate one-to-one competitor at the time when he was running WCW. And it's for that reason that Bischoff has, I think, a good amount and a respectable amount of credibility when speaking to that aspect of it. Now, there's certain areas where I think Bischoff is quite frankly just wrong. And I think that, there's varying degrees of that, which I'll talk about later. But here was his initial reaction to the report. And again, this one might actually shock you because Bischoff was not as vociferously anti-AEW as I think people like to claim that he usually is. But here's what he said.
What did I think of it? I think it's, first of all, it's nothing but good news. Let's be really clear. Despite what a lot of people have said, particularly in social media and some of the dirt sheets and Reddit comments that I've seen, where I've been, according to them, been forecasting, demise for AEW and that they would never get a new deal and all that, which is absolutely false. Going back probably a year ago, I predicted in all likelihood AEW would get a new deal. I did a couple times during that period, probably longer, a year and a half, when Raw was nobody knew for sure where Raw was going to end up before Netflix. There was a point in time when Warner Brothers was interested in acquiring those rights. And there were meetings, and that's been all documented. It's not news. It's not a secret. And I did say at that point that if indeed WBD were to end up with either Raw or SmackDown, it would be unlikely, very unlikely, that AEW would exist on WB. But as that didn't happen, and we all know where Raw is and SmackDown ended up, I'm not surprised. I guess I do kind of...
Okay, so again, relatively positive compared to some of the things that Bischoff has said in the past. He then went on to talk about, the idea of AEW being a profitable company and him not really buying into that. And for that, it is worth noting that, wrestling economists like, Brandon Thurston have said that, if they get a deal that is similar to what they are rumored and reported to be getting here, according to Puck News, then it lands them in, the general field of like, they are probably going to be profitable. And again, these are estimates. Tony Khan himself has also stated that he believes that like they're about to make a deal that will make them profitable. So like this isn't coming from nowhere, this idea of them being profitable. It's not something that was just conjured up on Reddit. It's not something that was just, made up on the fly. Like these are things just based off of, what we've heard officials from AEW say, but also someone like Brandon Thurston, who is, in my view, one of the most invaluable sources of information when it comes to professional wrestling, like business insight. He has all the numbers, whether it's TV ratings, revenue, or even just digging through and finding things that no other wrestling journalist would go to the lengths that he does to find, like requesting information from the state of Texas that, could land in a lawsuit, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, shout out to Brandon Thurston for all the work that he does, but there you heard Bischoff essentially say on his podcast Wise Choices that, it's a good thing for AEW, and that, he believes that he has not been, overly critical of All Elite Wrestling, which, take it or leave it, it is what it is. But I think generally what he said is true. Like, if AEW, or if Warner Bros. Discovery, for whatever reason, ended up getting Monday Night Raw, that would be bad for AEW. That would be horrible. That would be one of the worst case scenarios for the company, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying that as in like, oh, they would die overnight or whatever, but I don't think there was a partner that had more incentive to give them the deal that they got than Warner Brothers Discovery. That is truth. That does not mean that AEW wouldn't get an increase on the rights. I think they would. I think they would get an increase on their current rights, which are, all the programming for $40 or $70 million as it's estimated. I think they would get an increase on those rights. Would it be, $170 million a year? No, I don't think it would be. And that's no matter where they went. You went to Fox, you went to, ESPN, wherever you go, I don't think you're getting more than what Warner Brothers is getting. And for Warner Brothers, this was like they needed this. They needed a flagship, and they liked the partnership with AEW. It's something they were comfortable with. And on top of that, them having Max makes AEW to them more valuable than it would to other media properties that don't necessarily need for that. ESPN Plus doesn't necessarily need an AEW programming and that live sports aspect of it, because that's what they have, and that's what makes them so profitable. For Max, they don't have that, and Max needs that live aspect, that simulcast, that library of previous content, rewatchable content. That's what they are built on. So I think I agree with him there. I do think it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, it's an obvious statement to state, like, if no one offered WWE any money, well, they'd be in trouble. Of course they would, right? It's like, obviously not to that extreme, but it's, in my view, it's a very similar principle that he's coming from. There's another quote that I do want to talk about later on, but, again, generally, it's a good thing. That is what Eric Bischoff said, and it is a good thing. And like we can kind of like take it from here or there, like, but there's no way you can scoff at $170 million reported for a television rights deal. And the reality is too, like, again, we have to wait and see the breakdowns that are reported. We might find this out like trickling through like over the next several months, exactly like how much each part is worth. But if that Max component is separate, that is a massive deal for AEW. Like, that is big. And it's going to be big for their next media rights deal when they eventually do that. Anyway, of course, there had to be a bit of a negative component to this. Let's talk about this right here, what Eric Bischoff had to say later on. This is a quote from him. Until Tony Khan gets his creative infrastructure, until you really get a handle on creative and talent management and get your roster in place, the last thing you want to do is put creative pressure on a new company any more than necessary. And again, this is redundant, but I think the big mistake for a company that still hasn't figured out how to produce their A show to start spreading themselves thin and producing D show or E show, it's absolutely ridiculous to me. They don't have the intellectual or creative horsepower to pull it off, or to pull it off well. They'll get it done. They'll shit shows out the door and it'll land on TV, but they're going to continue until they do something different than what they've been doing the last 5 years. If next year looks anything like this year, they will lose another 30%. In 2025 versus 2024, it looks like 24 versus 23. What the fuck? Okay. That is him talking about the creative aspect of it and, the worry that AEW is putting out too many shows. And I actually, it might surprise you, tend to agree with Eric to an extent here. I do think that one of the issues that has plagued AEW and plagued shows like Dynamite and Collision to varying degrees, I want to say, has been the fact that there's been very little care put into them a lot of weeks. Collision, I mean, Rampage more so than Collision. Rampage is, I think, everyone's kind of accepted it is an afterthought. There is some good wrestling on Rampage, don't get me wrong, but it is not a must-watch show. It is like, it's Velocity, it's Main Event, it is, it's not even Sunday Night Heat, because there's no lead into a pay-per-view. So, I think, like, there have definitely been instances, and especially if you include Ring of Honor in this, where there's been very little care put into some of the content they've been putting out. I simply disagree with Eric on Dynamite. We can have a discussion about ratings and that being a thing, but Dynamite still is a strong show. They are, right now, Dynamite, AEW Dynamite, in 2024 and 2023, the 2 years that people are talking about, there's been a massive drop-off. In these 2 years, they have been doing better. They've been positioning better as far as the overall and demo ranking than they were in 2021 when they were doing 1 million viewers, or right around 900,000 viewers a week. And that is not me trying to pull stats that are good out of my butt. It's just true. Television is diminishing. Now, AEW's rate of losing viewers at a point was alarming and was faster than than they should have been, and faster than people were actually cutting the cord on the networks that they were on. That is true. And that does speak to an issue. And it does speak to, I think, several issues that AEW does have, and Dynamite specifically had in 2023. But that doesn't mean the show isn't good. If you ask me, Dynamite ever since June of 2024 has been the best wrestling show on TV. Objectively, take it all out of it, they've been telling logical stories. They have been, and like, here's the thing. You cannot like some of the stuff. There's stuff on Dynamite I'm not particularly fond of. But at the end of the day, things matter more, and they have mattered more on AEW TV in the past couple of months than they have in the months previous. That's just the truth. And they've been getting to telling really good stories. I think Hangman versus Swerve will go down as one of the best feuds of this generation. That's just true. Like, it is a legendary feud, and if you've watched it week to week, then you understand what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, and you've tuned in to a few clips online, and you rage baited a little bit when you saw the needle spot, well, I don't know what to tell you. Watch the product. Genuinely. That's not a shot at Eric at all. That is mostly a shot at some aggregation accounts online. Anyway, love y'all. But in all seriousness, I do think that while I think their product on Dynamite has been getting better, like, it is true that, like, the care that they put into other shows has diminished. Collision is a great example of this. AEW Collision in 2023, and look, you can talk about the Punk thing. That did hurt Collision for sure, but it didn't hurt it as much as it didn't need to hurt it as much as it did. It seemed like Collision almost, like, on a snap went from being like must see every week, a different vibe, a different feeling, a different aura around the show, to just being, here's some content. And that's what it became. That's what it is now. It's content. And content is king. Don't get me wrong. Content is king. And to make it in this ecosystem of media as a live, like, entertainer like AEW is, you have to produce as much content as you possibly can. That's where the money is. Tony Khan knew that in 2019 when he started the company. That's why they never ran house shows. That's why they're still not running house shows. And that's why there's no plan to run house shows, because he understands that television and these shows that they put on, that they're able to distribute, that is where the money is made. It's not like it was in the 2000s. It's not like it was in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s. The money is simply made through selling pay-per-views or distributing those major shows, and through these media rights deals for these different shows that you're doing weekly, and through merchandise, of course, which AEW, I will critique them day and night on merchandise. Don't get me wrong. But I think that it is true that, like, ROH is something I've said, and I will always state, that definitely should be delegated to someone else. Tony can still have, like, and again, it's not my company, but whatever, outside looking in. But something needs to give with ROH, because it is just not a cohesive, coherent show at this point. It's just not. The only thread through the entire like year and a half of ROH has been Athena. That's it. It's the only reason you watch the show, and that's not even from a star standpoint. That's just from like on a weekly basis, make the show make sense standpoint. It's Athena. That's it. Other than that, what are we doing here? You know? And it's great for Athena, but it actually ends up hurting Athena because if the show that she's on doesn't matter, then less people are going to watch and less people are going to be tuned into what she's doing and the wonderful work she's done. Someone who I think needs to be on AEW TV. Come on, Tony. Let's get her on AEW TV. But I do think that there is a degree of like, well, if they do produce like another show, like Shockwave, for example, what is it going to be? And is it going to be must-see? And how many shows can you have that are must-see? That is the question for AEW. And it's something that's, I can't answer right now. But Eric does bring up a good point. I think, again, on creative, if he wants to criticize creative over the past like couple of months, probably best to look at Monday Night Raw. Probably best to look at SmackDown over the past couple of weeks. Because quite frankly, it got to a point, and it has gotten to a point where I just don't watch Raw anymore. Past 2-3 weeks, been tuned out. Don't watch Raw anymore. Because it just, week to week, there was no progression of stories. SmackDown traditionally is an easier watch because it's 2 hours for now. For now, because starting in January, it's going to be 3 hours, and we're going to get more. But I don't even think SmackDown has been at the level that it should be, and at the level that it was in years past. And it's an issue. It is an issue. Like, biggest thing I will say about WWE's booking, it just feels like everything is slow. And everything is a slow burn. There's nothing what happened last week doesn't necessarily affect what happens going into next week. That is an issue for me as a viewer, as someone who's like, okay, I got to tune in next week. Why? And it feels like WWE at this point is kind of resting on the laurels of we have the biggest stars in the world, on the biggest platform in the world. Boom, content. And that's great. That's good. That's made them a lot of money. But it's not to the standard that it should be, right? And that's like, it's a bigger thing. I've talked about Cody and this Roman thing, and it just not making sense. I still don't know why Cody signed the contract, but that's a whole separate thing. Anyway, overall, though, obviously, the reason why we're talking about this is because Eric Bischoff has been one of the, I would say one of the loudest critics in that what he says kind of gets around, and not that he's like, constantly spewing hate or whatever, or the loudest, but, his like what he says gets around, his quotes get around, all that kind of stuff. That's just true. This is the nature of his presence on social media. But for him to even go out of his way and say it was a good thing, I think is a sign that this deal is great for AEW. I think that, going to be interesting to see what Jim Cornette has to say. Not that I'm a listener of the Cornette Experience, guys. I am not CM Punk. I don't listen to the drive-thru or the Experience like CM Punk does. But I think his is probably going to be the more lively thing to tune into. The reason I'm talking about this is just because, interesting stuff. Slow news cycle. It is Sunday. I am tired. And I wanted to just do a more casual kind of video. And I think, probably going to be doing more of these on, I think this might just be the vibe on Sundays. Do, more of a dissection of a podcast or an interview or something and do that. But who knows? I'll do whatever I want. It's my channel. Guys, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you guys want to help support the channel, you guys can become a channel member. Channel memberships are up on the channel. They should be, at least. You guys can sub there. You guys get some emojis, customized badges, guaranteed reply to comments within 24 to 48 hours. So all that stuff is up there. Become a channel member, subscribe, all that stuff. But hit that like button. That's the most important thing because it helps more people see the content that I'm putting out here. And we love that. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, I'm Omer Q for Real Take Wrestling. Be happy. Be healthy. As always, keep it real. and I'll see you next time.